On today's segment of Mindful Leaders, we zoom into the life of Dr. Garo Armen. Dr. Garo is co-founder and CEO of Agenus, a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company that primarily develops immunotherapies for cancer. Born to an Armenian family in Istanbul, he moved to New York City at the young age of 17 and obtained a Ph.D. in physical chemistry. He went on to become a successful scientist, entrepreneur, and business leader in pharmaceutical technologies and biotech. But Dr. Garo's endeavors do not stop there. In 2003, he founded the Children of Armenia Fund in Armenia, better known as COAF, with the intention to empower the new generation of Armenians in rural villages. Today, we delve into personal topics to understand the drive that makes Dr. Garo Armen who he is, from tragedy, loss, childhood memories, to success, entrepreneurship, leadership, and his love for Armenia. Dr. Garo Armen, welcome to Mindful Leaders.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Through this program, I look to meet with people from whom I can learn. I look for insight, I look for depth, I look for wisdom. And although I know about you and all that you've accomplished, I really don't know who you are. So tell me the earliest context or your earliest childhood memory about you that I need to know to help me understand the person sitting in front of me and help me relive something from your childhood.
I guess when you put the question, who am I? The best answer is that I am. So we develop through life in ways that some of which is planned and anticipated, but a lot of it is not. So I was born in Istanbul, and I grew up with the stories of my grandmother. My grandmother was a victim of the genocide. She had escaped with her family. And when I was young and I heard those stories, it was like a movie. It was a painful movie, but it was a movie. And then at around 12, 13 years old, it all of a sudden struck me that this is real. And of course, at a young age, you're idealistic, and I said, we need to have our own country in order to prevent a genocide again. Little did I know that the circumstances of today, even with a country, are still things that expose you. And I was vocal about it in my Armenian school, and our vice principal, in Turkey, all the vice principals are, I should say vice principals of minority schools like Armenians are Turkish. And they did that to keep an eye on what was going on in the school system with the Armenian population. So my vice principal, Effendi Bey, called me in because one of the classmates had ratted on me and physically beat me for my ideas. And when my father heard about it, he said, you have to leave this country and go. And that's what I did. I never went back.
What was your family environment like?
Oh, my father was a hard-working man. He was a car mechanic. He had never had a chance to really develop his academic skills. He was a brilliant mathematician, a brilliant artist, but never developed because his father died at a young age, and he had to work at something like 10th, 11th grade, or I should say 10th or 11th year of age. And so I remember him waking up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and going to work. The only day he didn't work was on Sundays. And my mother was a wonderful lady, housewife. My grandmother, my father's mother, was a very strong-willed lady. She was a little lady, never went to school, had very strong opinions, had a lot of experiences, and this lady was one of the most profound, really, experiences in my life to listen to her. She had a major role in developing me.
She lived with you?
No, she didn't. I went to an Armenian school called Mkhitar that was in Pandalta district of Istanbul. I lived in Feripur, which was about a 15-minute walking distance. And my grandmother was literally in the middle. So every day from school, I'd go to my grandmother. She'd make me tea and all kinds of baked goods and tell me stories. And I'd be with her for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then go home.
Is she the immunologist you refer to?
Well,
the organic immunologist who didn't have an education but who had the knowledge?
You have read some of my stuff, yes. So she was an immunologist without knowing that she was an immunologist, because I was the first grandchild and happened to be a grandson. At that time, being a grandson was an honor. Today we have to be careful in terms of how we portray these things, but at that time there was no ill intent. That's how it was. And so whenever I got sick with a cold or something like that, my grandmother used to come with sheets of cotton, and cotton is a fantastic retainer of heat. Put it on our ceramic stove, every 5-10 minutes, and come in and put it around my armpits to activate my lymph nodes. Now, she didn't understand immunology, but she did it. And many years later, when I studied immunology, I knew that she was actually activating my immune system to defeat the disease. And that played a role in my subsequent objectives of how do we use immunology, which is a very fundamental part of the body, to heal, to help heal the body. And that's what my business is today.
Right, so Agenus. You've had other companies that you've founded and led before that or during that, but Agenus, from what I know, 30 years old almost, I think.
Yes.
Right, and I'm just thinking how much your grandmother impacted you in this area, or even your mother. But tell me a little bit about Agenus for a person who's not a scientist, who doesn't know much about immunology. What is the intention and why this company?
So you touch on a bunch of subjects that are very nicely connected, actually. You asked me the question in the beginning, planning something versus letting life take you where it needs to take you. So when I was 15 and a half, my mother was diagnosed with cancer in Istanbul. And at that time, when you had cancer, it was like a taboo. It was something like the plague. People wouldn't talk about it. It was embarrassing. And the reason is because cancer was a deadly disease then, and it's largely a deadly disease today. It's the composition of who dies and who lives changed a little bit, but still very much a deadly disease. So I remember when she was operated on, and after the operation, she touched her left breast and felt that it was gone. And she didn't know, she wasn't told that that was going to happen before the surgery. It sounds archaic and cruel these days, but that's how it was then. And so she was devastated, and unfortunately, a couple of years later, she died. I had moved to the US to study, and I brought her to the US to have some experimental treatments, but she died. And then subsequently, I had many different experiences with cancer. Friends, my childhood friend Arto had gastric cancer, and he died within a year. And then a young child of a friend of mine from Lebanon died at the age of 3. And then my first cousin died about 13 years ago from pancreatic cancer. So all of these things happen. But as life develops and you feel that maybe, whether it's realistic or not, but you feel that you can do something about it. So when I was exposed to some technologies in the early 90s, I was convinced that I could do something about this. It wasn't going to be easy. It was controversial. Certainly at that time, immunology was very controversial. Immunology in the context of cancer was very controversial. But Maybe I was stupid enough or brave enough to pursue it, and I did. No regrets. And today, I think we are pretty much there in terms of treating and curing patients that were incurable before. And I think you'll see significant progress with it in the coming years.
So many interesting ideas you actually mentioned, but the first thing that comes to mind is if I'm a person who wants to be an entrepreneur and I have an idea I firmly believe in, a product, a service, I don't know, an idea that I firmly believe in, and I do want to establish something, but I don't have the funds, I don't have the cash flow, I don't, what would I do? What business advice would you give me?
So you bring up a very important subject, and you used a couple of concepts here. You started out by saying, if I want to become an entrepreneur. Well, if you want to become an entrepreneur for the sake of becoming an entrepreneur, you're on the wrong track. But if you have a conviction about something, a very strong idea, and bringing that idea to fruition requires an element of entrepreneurship, then it's okay. But unfortunately, in today's environment, we have business schools, leading business schools, and these schools have entrepreneurship programs. I am totally against that, because to me, to train somebody in entrepreneurship is nothing more or less than training somebody to exploit the system. So entrepreneurship is perhaps a required element to bring a conviction to fruition, not the other way around. So I don't like the idea of
You mentioned something also that, it's how people perceive it. And when I speak to, older teenagers or young adults, they have this romantic idea that an entrepreneur has this glorious life. They have the wealth, the notoriety, the reputation, the network. And so there's this idea that being an entrepreneur is I wouldn't say fashionable, but romantic. So that's why, for me, asking this question is important. Having the idea, thinking, is it all that it is, this wealth, this glamour? Is that what it is? When people see, the different types of entrepreneurs who have made millions and they're flying off on, first-class jets, and what does it take, really?
So
is it more than just thinking about my personal wealth and my, this is where I want to be able to, understand why the younger generation, or at least even people in all generations, think that it's a glamorous life. Is it really?
I think that's a horrible pattern that is developing. I think self-interests at the expense of the society are an evil path for people. Evil path because, if you look at, for example, what's going on in the world right now, politically and otherwise, and I must declare my disclaimer that I'm not an expert in geopolitics or economics. I'm just a man that has been exposed to several things and have some level of common sense, I hope, to be able to connect the dots and make sense out of things. So if you look at the world right now, and you look at what is driving attention. So it used to be that when I was growing up, if you were a physician or a teacher, you were amongst the highest regarded people. Okay. Today, if you're a Wall Street tyrant or a political tyrant, you become sort of idealized because you are portrayed to have a lifestyle that, as superficial as it is, are glamorized by the screen of the TV or social media and so on and so forth. And I'm afraid that that takes people in the wrong direction. You know, these types of patterns don't result in a world that is in the best interest of our future generations. It just doesn't. And so I think we need to, from time to time, press the reset button and think about who are we? What are we trying to accomplish? And what kind of a world we want to build for the future generations. And that's what interests me personally, and that's what drove me to do what I do in Armenia and to do what I do with my company. And you know, I look at other waves of influences that are going on with the world and the predicament that Armenia is in today, politically and geopolitically and otherwise. And I think we can make all of that change.
How?
How is, you know, so often, what is less challenging? Why is less challenging than the how? I mean, of course, we want to have a world where people live in peace and harmony with each other. That's the what, you know. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. And why? Because why? It will create a very harmonious world for everybody to function in unison, to create some good things. Now, how do we achieve that? That's the most difficult part. So how do we achieve it? Well, I think how we achieve it has largely to do with educating people, our young generation, at a time when they can absorb the maximum out of that education. Education is critical. And Armenian has two words, usanel, գրթություն, you know. And I think both need to be integrated. I don't think English has the distinction of the two.
I actually see it as education and cultivation, or cultivated,
Yeah,
you know, something
like that. And so so that's what I believe personally, that if we catch them at the right time and we can influence them, I think you can set them on the right path. Now, when I say the right path, I don't mean a contrived path that has been predetermined for them, but a path that will allow them the freedom to distinguish between what is mostly right and what is mostly wrong, so that they, through their own choices, can pursue what is mostly right. But what is mostly right is something that they need to create themselves, because there are many rights that we are not aware of. And I think if we can really develop their awareness, or maybe their awakeness, if we make them awake to really be able to see things and be able to do what is in their best interest, which should ideally coincide with the best interest of humanity, then we have created something special. So now, for example, when I look at some of the tyrants around the world,
For instance?
say, sorry?
For instance?
You know, for instance, well, perhaps I shouldn't say for instance, but I'll give you one example. When the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan came into power, I remember reading about him, and it was 2003, and reading about his principles. And I said, you know, I left Turkey under circumstances that were not desirable. There was hostility on my part, maybe wrongly, and on the part of the counterparts there. But when Erdogan came into power, and when I sort of read about his philosophy, I said, maybe this is a good man, and he will lead a country to the good things, away from corruption, and away from some of the biases that we have about Turkish administrations in Turkey. And so I was hopeful. And in fact, I stuck to my conviction for some time, for some years. And then I was disappointed when things changed. And of course they say power corrupts. Power and money corrupts. And unfortunately, that's what happened. And it is a pity that such a man with the right idealism could end up where he is right now. So he's someone that I followed, and today I cannot say I am hopeful of his ideology, because things have turned in the opposite direction. Now, there are many other leaders around the world who didn't start with such good underpinnings as Erdogan. And yet they are in a place like Erdogan is today, but some of these negatives about them come naturally. So, but right now, as you said earlier, Lara, money and power has superseded all. And in today's environment, now, I am an idealist. I don't think that will last. I don't think it's something sustainable. And I am sure that change will come. And when change comes, I think it will be a good change. I just hope that it comes sooner rather than later. And when the change comes, it may come at a substantial cost to the tyrants, personally, for their countries sometimes, or their families. And that's not a wish on my part, but I see that as inevitable, right, because I don't think these conditions can continue.
Right, or sustain. Awakening, the word you use. It's hard to find a leader who actually is awakened or conscious or mindful, who has that moral skeleton. What is your interpretation of leadership? You talked about awakening, you talked about leaders today. What is your interpretation? Have you made mistakes along the road, struggled with, and learned from as a leader yourself?
You know, when you talked about entrepreneurship, the same parallels apply to leadership, meaning you're not defined as a leader. It's just that when there is a need that requires you to lead and you take on that responsibility to lead, then you become a leader. Now, of course, you can become a leader to lead people in the wrong direction, fool them, like what's going on in many of the countries run by tyrants today, trick them into doing the wrong things, and sooner or later, that will come back to bite you in a big way, and the people, unfortunately, in a big way. Or you can see a trend that is what I would call a positive trend, the right trend, and persuade people to go on that path. So you can have leaderships to take people in on the negative path or the positive path. But I hope that we're talking about leadership to take people on the positive path. So in order to do that, the right way, you have to believe what you are doing. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your ideology. And you have to have the capacity to convince others that that's the right thing to do. And so that comes in some naturally and others not so naturally. But you know, if you have a strong conviction about what is right and wrong, generally, unless you have major handicaps in communication and expression, you can become an effective leader.
You've led, you established the Children of Armenia Fund 20 years ago, around that time. And I've observed a lot of your colleagues who actually follow your mission to help empower children in the rural regions of Armenia. And I've seen how loyal your staff from COAF has been basically. When I say loyal, it means that they haven't left, they believe and they pursue the mission wholeheartedly and with a lot of passion and determination. I'm assuming that it's the culture that you've built in COAF, and I'm assuming that's how it is in Agenus as well. What does it take to actually ensure that you have people who follow you when the right conviction is there, the morality is there? What do you establish? What do you make sure you do to ensure that a person will be by your side to implement your vision?
Well, I hope that it is not just my vision, it is our collective vision, because it is the right thing to do. So we start out with what you said. Is this the right thing to do? Is there compelling evidence that what we're pursuing is right? And so originally when we started out with COAF, it was in a single village. And I made a promise on my first visit to an elderly man. And I said, I see your conditions being deplorable here, particularly as it pertains to children, and I will be back to do something about it. And he had been promised so many things, and he looked at me, he said, everybody tells us that and never comes back. So that's how COAF started. In fact, one of my friends said, that statement was probably the catalyst for you to come back, because you were doubted. And it's not just a selfish thing, to overcome somebody's doubt, but we thought it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do to snap the young people out of the predicament that they seem to be. And so as we expanded our activities, we expanded organically, because I remember some of the agencies in Yerevan that I met at the time said, well, you've never done this before, so what makes you think that you're going to be successful? And I asked them a simple, innocent question. I said, have you done this before? Because you're an agency, you have a lot more experience. And they said, no. So I said, just because you haven't done it and we haven't done, does that mean it shouldn't be done, even though it's the right thing to do? So some of them became our collaborators because of the fact that we were on the right path. We were doing something that needed to be done. So back to your question, doing something for which there is a need, very important. Doing something for which there is a need, and doing it the right way. Now, what does right mean? To me, then and now, it means doing it with the highest standards, okay? Doing it responsibly in a reasonably short period of time, and doing it, making sure that it's done honestly. There are many organizations that allow for squandering of monies and so on and so forth. And so from the start, we paid attention to these values. And from the start, we decided that we would build our own organization to do many of the things that needed to be done, because of course it's a lot more possible to control things when you have your own organization and you can control quality standards and integrity standards and so on and so forth. So that's how it got started. And I think translating to Agenus, it's the same thing. We believe that immunology would be the holy grail to curing cancer until proven otherwise. And so far, not only have we not been proven otherwise, but our beliefs have been reinforced along the way. And so when you have this kind of conviction, and it is the right thing to do, you attract like-minded people. And when you have those like-minded people, it becomes the DNA of the organization. Right. And so I'm very privileged to have that on both sides, both at Genus and COAF.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Normally, it takes a trauma, chaos, a disease, betrayal, or loss for a person to actually reach the lowest denominator, when in fact, it could be a moment of reckoning of the soul. It could be a moment to change for the better. Given the context in which Armenians as a collective in Artsakh, in diaspora, and what's happening in the world today, how do you see that kind of change for the better? You mentioned a little bit about the hope and the leadership. You mentioned a little bit about ways that can be done and the self-conviction, the self-belief. I'm just curious to know, as a collective, and not just in terms of Armenians on the territory of Armenia and Artsakh, but everywhere, what are the main concerns you see, and how do you see the vision? What's the vision for the next 5-10 years?
So I think, as you mentioned, we're in one of the most challenging of times for the country and the people. And you said, we're at the bottom, or at least what seems to be the bottom. And so when you're confronted with that reality and you want to simplify your choices, you have two choices. One, you can give up and surrender, and I don't mean just surrender politically and militarily, but surrender spiritually and from an intellectual perspective. Or you can regroup and you can basically build or rebuild what our cultural heritage of 3,000 years deserves. We owe it to our ancestors and future generations to make sure that what has been wronged is righted in the future. Now, of course, in a situation like we're in right now, we need to parallel track two things. One is crisis management, which is how do we get out of the immediate crisis that we're in, the dangers that we face right now, for which we don't really have a lot of the luxury of time to hire consultants and put together a business plan to do or a political plan to do. Crisis management requires certain skill sets. I know a little bit about that because I've done it. Simultaneously with that, we need a longer-term plan. And a longer-term plan in this context is not a 20-year plan. I would characterize a crisis management needs for the next 6 months, maybe 12, and a longer-term plan for the next 5 years, not longer than that. Because when you go too long, beyond 5 years, you open yourself up to dreaming and cheating about the results that you're achieving in the interim. So that's what I think we need to do now. How do we do that? We need to mobilize the people of this country with the right leadership. Now, I'm not making any judgments on what is a right leadership. It's very possible that the current leadership is the right leadership, but we also need to consider if there are people out there that don't think the current leadership is the right leadership, what is the alternative? Is the alternative going back to the ways which we revolted against as people and got us here? Or is it to unify our people, whether they are in diaspora or in this country, and coach, provide the proper coaching to the people and to the leadership? And any leadership needs coaching. Superstars of a sports team need coaching. So do we do that? and have a plan to address the crisis and our 5-year development. And I think it's possible. It's possible. But unity is critically important, because when I look at, for example, our neighbors, Azerbaijan, not only do they seem to be unified among themselves, but they are also unified amongst their collaborators, whether it is Turkey or Israel or others, they are unified. And it's heartbreaking to see Armenia so disunified, if that's a word, amongst the people here, amongst the diaspora, amongst the people of the government, and so on. So we have to change that. And that can be changed with a very strong vision of the what and the how.
And constructive mutual dialogue. You mentioned coaching and all that. I think one has to be humble enough to know his or her weaknesses, and to acknowledge and to openly admit and to say, these are the instruments or tools that I need. And it goes both ways, you know, that mutual dialogue, that constructive dialogue of listening to what the other party has to say, the other person has to say, the diaspora or the local. This, I think, in terms of unity, takes also a very strong leadership style to also be humble enough to admit, you know, the mistakes that are being made, and to also show that they are at the forefront of it all, to be transparent and open. I think you as a leader, I've noticed that you've done this. You communicate pretty much with all levels of your staff. I mean, it doesn't have to be just at the senior level. You're open, so they're able to feel and understand what your vision is, where you're going. And I think that's what, in general, a population needs, that is wholehearted, genuine, honest, and not tricking, as you said, right? I can go on and talk to you for hours, but given the limitation of time, I want to be able to close this to say, you know, the very brief conversation, I was able to understand a little bit about tweak your brain on certain topics. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to be with me and to really think about a few areas that I would want to improve upon. So thank you, Dr. Garo Armen, for this time, for this opportunity, for the genuine conversation.
Likewise, thank you very much.